everybody. I am so sorry for being late to the party. We've had some mind-blowing tech issues that I have no understanding of, but thankfully we have Marcel and a whole bunch of other tech gurus in Joburg who have managed a workaround. Weirdly, what I was doing before was working fine, but it suddenly decided to stop. And so we've had to come up with a workaround. Hello, everyone. My name's Maxine Gaines. I'm going to be with you this afternoon and so happy that you can finally hear me and very happy to be on board. Um, we are at Juma at the moment, by the looks of things, which is great. I'm going to be there in a few days in the flesh, and I can't wait to see all this water and all the changes that the rains have brought on. I'm super excited. I know that often in February you get lots more rain, so it'll be really interesting to see what the weather does over the month ahead and whether that's going to bring even more water to Juma and the Sabi Sands. Well, apparently there are some Ellies at Tembe, so let's go and have a look at what's happening in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Beautiful Tembe elephants. Lovely to see that chap just having a rest in the shade of that Natal mahogany tree. I noticed some of your comments while we were still trying to figure out what was going on with all the tech issues. You were saying it was so lovely to start with a leopard tortoise. It was. It was gorgeous to see that leopard tortoise. um, and nice to see you on board with us, Joan and Spaz. Um, and Spaz is asking if I have seen the Lentor cam. I haven't seen it today, but I'm sure we might take a little look a bit later. Ari, lovely to have you on board from the Netherlands, and Mercedes Bean. It's great to chat to you again too. So welcome everyone that is joining. And again, I just want to apologize for my tardiness. It was kind of out of my hands. I'm really not very good as far as tech goes, but even Marcel, who is a real guru, was struggling. So I don't feel too bad that I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, so glad that we found a workaround and that it's all working. Those Ellies all seem to be bulls, a little chiller group. Interesting to see there how they're all very similar in size from a body point of view, and yet their tusks are so different in size. And that's just a lovely indicator of how the tusk size is genetic rather than age related. Because when you look at them, they all seem to be similar ages. There's slight differences in size, but not really a lot. And yet the tusk of that one that's just disappearing off to the left was way bigger than the tusks of those other bulls. So really interesting to see that. Always lovely to see the impala so relaxed as well, just enjoying some quiet time. Gosh, you're asking if there are any studies that show where the first concept of a bachelor herd started. Gosh, not to my knowledge. There are so many species that kind of use bachelor herds as part of their social structure. It would be really interesting to know um, what species was first. And often I think it's probably a case of you could call it behavioral convergent evolution, where a certain behavioral trait just makes sense from an evolutionary point of view. And so it might evolve separately in a number of different species and not be something that kind of starts with one species and is then passed down genetically. So there are many, even physical traits. There are some physical traits that just make sense for the environment that the creature is in. And so one species might evolve to look like another species, not because they're closely related, but just because the body function works for the environment that they live in. A typical example of that would be old world and new world vultures. The vultures in Africa are actually not closely related to vultures in the Americas at all, and yet superficially they look very similar, and they have very similar kind of diets, and the way they live their lives is very similar, so their behavior is similar. And so behavioral traits can evolve separately in many different species if it makes sense for the survival of that species. And so I would imagine that bachelor herds would be something that has evolved separately in many different species as a behavioral trait, because it just makes sense as a male um, to hang around with other males and not be on your own, particularly from the point of view of predators. So it makes sense if you are an animal that lives in kind of open plains. It would make sense to be in a group rather than trying to survive on your own. And so I'm sure it has evolved in many different species separately. A very interesting question there. Thank you. There've been some amazing questions that have come about today on the drive as well. I was watching from afar and listening to the questions that you were all asking around um, around various things, and I just love it because when you guys ask fascinating questions, it actually um, you know things that we haven't thought about before as guides then come to the fore, and we can go and do more research and more reading on that. So it's fantastic the way that you guys help us grow our knowledge, and then through this medium we can then grow the knowledge of people that are watching. So it's a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And Mercedes Bean, you asking, are there any breeding herds in Tembe? Definitely. There are definitely breeding herds in Tembe. There are lots of elephants in Tempe, and I've been there many years ago and seen a number of breeding herds. So yeah, they definitely occur. Maybe don't see them coming down to this waterhole as often as we see the males for some reason. But I have seen breeding herds coming down here too. Oh, that boy's having a lovely scratch on the tree there. Picasso, you saying that summer is your favorite season? Yeah, I agree. I love summer. I love the green. I love the life. I love the rainfall. It's all just wonderful. I do understand that winter is necessary and it's a time for things to rest, and it's a necessary season. Um, but I'm a summer girl. I love it. Interesting to see how that elephant is touching that tree with his trunk. Doesn't seem as if there are any branches there that he is going for, but he's really having a good feel of the trunk. Almost reminds me of hugging a tree, which I love to do. I've seen Steve do it on a number of occasions as well. It almost looked like that elephant was hugging the tree. Wild at Hearts, afternoon to you. Lovely to have you on board with us. Yes, Erica, I do. I love your description of it as being a symbiosis between the naturalists and the viewers. I really do believe that. There are so many times that a viewer or a guest has asked me a question that has got me thinking about something in a completely different way, or posed a question that I've never even thought of before. So I do think it's a symbiosis. It then, instigates more research and just more knowledge that gets out there. So I love it. Sally, do elephants show signs of boredom? Ah, yeah, I am of the firm belief that boredom is a human construct. Um, I really don't think that animals, I certainly haven't seen, I don't know what would constitute signs of boredom, I suppose, but I, I can't say that I've ever noticed it in animals. And as a mom, it really irks me when either of my boys say I'm bored. There's just so much to do and think about and read. And I think part of boredom in our culture and society today is because we've got so much coming at us so fast on social media, on televisions, that when you try and just slow things down a bit and give yourself a chance to just think or just be, people interpret that as being bored. And yeah, I don't know whether I believe in. I don't think that I believe that animals get bored. I think they are constantly um, in the moment, as it were. If you if living in the moment and reacting to whatever life throws at them in that moment. So yes, I can't say that I've ever seen elephants being bored. I have seen elephants just standing doing nothing, and I think perhaps that we as humans don't do that enough. And I think I have read papers that say that without boredom, and I don't know if I would use that term, um, humans' creativity goes down because if you don't have time to just sit and think, um, then you're probably not going to come up with new ideas or be as creative as you would be. So yeah, boredom is an interesting concept. I suppose you're asking what are the smallest antelope that you can see at Tembe. So the 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 red duiker is quite small, but at Tembe you also get the little blue duiker, which is tiny, 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 and you would also get the suni, which is a very, very small antelope. I've never seen either of them on the camera here, but they definitely do occur. Both of those species occur um, at Tembe, the blue duiker and the suni, and they are probably the two tiniest that you would get. And my brain is not working at the moment. I think that the blue duiker might be slightly smaller than the Sunni. I would need to go and check up on the weights of those. Um, Lenny, you're asking how old are elephants when they get their last set of teeth? Lenny, I think they are in their 40s or late 30s, 40s, but I'd have to just make sure on that for you. I see there's an elephant just kind of um, standing, not doing much. Now, is he bored? Yes, so around the age of 30, from 30 to their mid 30s, it can be different for different elephants. So into their mid 30s is about the time that they get their last teeth. Um, but as with humans, some babies' teeth erupt before others in terms of age. So you can have slight variations in that. And I suppose also depending on how fast their front tooth wears down, because I think that would also then stimulate, if that front tooth is wearing down, it's making space for the next one to come up. So you probably find that in captivity, um, elephants would get their last teeth maybe at a different time to elephants in the wild, and also elephants in different habitats in the wild, depending on what their food is, might get their last tooth at a slightly different age, but it would be at some stage in their 30s to mid 30s that they would get that last tooth. So a very interesting question here by Lenny, and I'm going to read it out word for word. Would you say with orcas and animals that are in captivity, when they say they are not stimulated enough, it is not a sign of boredom, but more of not having enough space and freedom? Um, so yeah, I mean, I it's a tough one. I feel very sorry for animals in captivity. I really struggle to come to terms with keeping animals in captivity for any reason unless it is breeding endangered species with the intent to release them back into the wild. And you do see animals in captivity, an orca that's in captivity and is just kind of circling round and round and round a tiny pool. I don't know if it's bored, but what other options does it have? It's got nowhere else to swim, so it's just gonna circle round and round and round. And if you see an animal in a zoo just kind of sitting in one spot and not really interacting with its environment, is that boredom or is that depression? I would I would probably interpret that more as being depressed rather than being bored. Particularly predators or animals that are kept as a single animal in a cage. Um, if they are behaving differently to the way they would in the wild, who can blame them? And it's, for me, my interpretation would be that they're depressed. I suppose other people might interpret it as boredom, and it's very, very difficult to know for sure because we're putting our spin on it, as it were. So yes, again, another really interesting discussion. Kim Faustino, you asking, are these impala different from the other group with young? They're probably one big herd, but when it comes to these water holes, you will sometimes find different herds that are not necessarily always associating with each other, coming down for a drink. And with an animal like an impala, they're probably going to quite peacefully share a water hole, come down for a drink, and then head in different directions. So I suppose we'd have to watch them for a while to see what they do when they leave. They could easily be one herd, or they may be two separate herds that have both come down to the water hole to drink. And if it's not rutting season, they'll be very tolerant of one another. Well, it looks like there might be some nice birds around Old Donyo, so let's leave these Ellies and Impala for a bit. We might come back to them a bit later. And let's go and cross to Old Donyo and see what is happening at waterhole. Hmm. And I can hear some ringneck doves calling. There do seem to be a lot of swallows darting around in the sky. A little bit difficult to see what species they are in flight like that. I'm presuming barn swallows because they are generally the most common throughout Africa in our summer. Ah, okay, we've got an Ellie pool party at one of the other lodges. So I think we're going to leave this. Oh, wow, there's a lot of insects and swallows. But let's quickly go and have a look at the Ellie pool party. We could always come back here. Looks like it's raining at Old Donyo, which is lovely. Oh, wow, how lovely is that? So here we are at Africa Cow Game Lodge in Madikwe. And gosh, what a green Madikwe this is. So beautiful to see. Oh, there is a tiny, tiny, tiny elephant in kind of behind that one that's kneeling down. Oh, look how small that baby is. Oh my goodness. Oh, there is nothing like a baby Ellie for cuteness. Look at the tail up in the air. Oh, and the biggest sibling, I'm assuming it's a sibling, just poking it in the rear with its tusks. That wasn't very nice. Such a tiny little thing. Very cheeky as well. Look how it's got its tail lifted up in the air, ears out, mock charging everyone else in the herd. That's so cute. Looks like all of them have had a bit of time in the mud. You can see by their bodies they've all really, they look wet, they look muddy, they look like they've all had a bath and a mud spa. That little one is so sweet, man. There's two of them, two teeny tiny ones. Oh my goodness, they look around the same age as well. It's very rare for Emmys to have twins, so I'm thinking it's probably just coincidental and there's two different mums, but they were almost identical in size, those tiny little ones. They've gone off to the right now, unfortunately. That little one's throwing some dry dust onto the sticky mud. Bit of a bottom scratch there. Oh my gosh. These guys are so entertaining. I love it. Look at that beautiful meadow of yellow flowers in the background there. I actually wish I knew what flowers they were. It's quite difficult to identify species from this distance, but how pretty is that? Oh, wow. Got some rhino coming down. Okay, so we're going to head over to Safari Hook now and see what's happening there. Gosh, look how different this is. Namibia, desert, semi-desert. Even in the rainy season, there is very, very little greenery around. I know that Namibia has been in the midst of quite a serious drought for a long time now. And I think if you do hit a rainy season in Namibia, when they do get rain, the country can green up quite nicely. But wow, this looks very, very dry. You just wonder where these animals are finding food to eat. Again, loads of swallows just kind of flitting above the water. You can see insects swooping down to the water as well. So I'm assuming that the swallows are catching insects above the water. They do sometimes swoop down and grab a mouthful of water as well on the wing. And again, I couldn't see the species of swallow that was swooping down in amongst all the dragonflies and other things that are buzzing around there. Look at the insect activity. It's actually incredible to see how many insects there are around that waterhole. It's I sometimes have to remind myself to not focus on the big animals. I've been watching the wildebeest the whole time, and then when I actually started paying attention, there's so much going on above this waterhole from an insect point of view. Butterflies, dragonflies, all kinds of buzzing and flitting insects. Quite incredible. There's some plains zebra there and some springbuck coming down. Mm. This camera is just alive with insects. It's unbelievable to see how many of them there are. See how vigilant the zebra is as well as he's drinking. just been reading some articles on zebra and one of the accepted, kind of the latest accepted subspecies for plain zebra, and it's quite interesting. Depending on which article you read, there are either 6 or 7 different subspecies of plains zebra. So what we used to call the Birchall's zebra in the old days is now Birchall's is only one subspecies of 6 or 7 subspecies of plain zebra, and there also seems to be quite a lot of dispute as to where each of these subspecies occurs. So until that has all been sorted out, I will just refer to them as plains zebra. Dean, you're asking, are insect species as widespread and diverse as mammals and birds? I would say more so. Maybe not in terms of widespread, because there are mammals and birds that occur in places like Antarctica, where you're probably not going to find many insects, but certainly diverse. There are many, many, many more species of insect than there are mammals or birds. So very, very diverse group, and new ones being discovered all the time, new species of insect. So yes, very, very diverse group. It's quite humbling to realize that if the mammals and birds went extinct, us included, the Earth would probably go on without too many problems. Life on Earth would be absolutely fine. But if insects died off, then life on Earth as we know it would disappear. Um, the plants, most plants require insects for pollination or require insects in some way. And even, insect life in the soil, invertebrate life in the soil. So without insects, we would have a very different planet. Whereas without mammals and birds, there's not actually, it wouldn't make too many difference. Too much difference, should I say. Oh, such a lovely picture there of those 3 almost mirror images of each other drinking there. Lovely. Baz, you're asking, is this waterhole not on a salt pan? I suppose there are a lot of salt pans around Namibia, and it is possible that the Safari Hook waterhole is on a salt pan, in which case the vegetation would not get very green throughout the year. But I do know that Namibia is really suffering with a drought at the moment, regardless of whether this is a salt pan or not. I see a very big, I'm just looking on Google Earth here. There's a very large salt pan off to the north and west of Safari Hook. But Safari Hook itself, the waterhole, doesn't appear to be in a salt pan. I think it's just in that kind of desert, semi-desert ecosystem. Yeah, Lady Macbeth, you make a good point. The planet would be probably quite different without vertebrates, but there would be plenty of life Yeah, I agree. There would be still plenty of life, but it would just be different life. Whereas without insects, many scientists kind of theorize that life as we know it, or all life would be extinguished. That's why the insect Armageddon that is spoken about so widely, if you read a lot of scientific papers or scientific literature, is a very, very real thing. We really need to take care of our insects. They are so important for all kinds of reasons, mainly pollination, but many, many other reasons as well. Insects are vital for life as we know it on Earth. And if we continue to nuke them with all forms of insecticides in our homes and on our farms, we really are creating a recipe for disaster. There's a really interesting book written by a chap called Doug Tallamy. I think he's Professor Doug Tallamy. He's a lives in the US, and his book is called, I think it's called Nature's Best Hope, and it talks about this insect Armageddon and what we as individuals can do to help keep insects alive and well and flourishing. And I think one of the first things is just to try and put aside our this fear of insects that so many people have, that's been kind of brainwashed into us by society. We really need to appreciate these incredible creatures for what they are and not be fearful of them. Because if you're fearful of something, you don't really mind killing it. But if you can appreciate the role it plays in life as we know it, then you start to want to save it. Amazing. I'm actually mesmerized just watching all these dragonflies and things flying past. Also beautiful to see the reflections in the water of the zebra. Such a picturesque scene. You wonder how far these zebras have had to walk to get to this water hole. They are very dependent on water. Most equids are. So they probably can't wander too far from the water hole. And that also doesn't help the vegetation around the water hole, because if there's constant herds close to the water hole, because it's the only source of water, then that vegetation around the water hole gets denuded far more quickly than it would if they have to wander long distances each day to find water. So interesting to see, even just in one subspecies of zebra, the difference in the coat between that one on the kind of on the left there with hardly any shadow stripes, and then the one just next to it that has very, very dark brown shadow stripes. So interesting. Just goes to show you can't use the coat colors as a way to differentiate between the subspecies. You really have to start looking at the genetic makeup of these animals. Lady Macbeth, you're saying it's zebra migration season in Namibia. Yeah, the herds there do undergo not quite the same migration that you get up in East Africa, but they do certainly move around seasonally in response to the rainfall. Problem in places like Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, is that so many farmers have started putting up fences. Well, and it's been the case for many years, especially in South Africa. Um, and that can be a serious problem for the animals because it cuts off their migratory pathways. Whereas up in East Africa, that area is completely unfenced, and so you have this massive, massive migration that happens that is unhindered by fences, so the animals can really move in response to the rain. In certain parts of southern Africa, they can't do that as much anymore because of private farms that are fencing themselves out. Okay, well, we are going to head over to another camera now. We'll leave the zebra to their drinking and go and see what else is happening at one of the other AfriCam spots. Cute little foal there. So we're very lucky here at this camera that we are able to show you some rhino. It's so lovely to see a mother and calf here. Always such a privilege to see rhino and yeah, always just reminded of how we need to really appreciate every single sighting we have of this species. Very young calf there. He's hardly got a horn. Tiny little horn. Raw, you are asking for the name of that book. Yes, sure. It's a book by Doug Tallamy, and it's called Nature's Best Hope. And it's a fascinating read. It really is. I would highly recommend it for anyone that has any interest in conservation in any way. In fact, I would go so far as to say it should be mandatory reading for every single human being on the planet, but we'll leave it as, yeah, if you're interested in conservation, it's a fantastic book to read. Oh, such a sweet little rhino that he's hiding. I'm saying he. I have no idea if it is a he or a she because she is hiding so well behind mum that I haven't been able to have a look. Now, this is a case linking back to what we were talking about earlier. Um, there's the rhino female just kind of standing there, not doing anything. I suppose some people might interpret that as, well, maybe she's bored, but I certainly don't. I've never looked at an animal and thought, oh, they must be bored. I think she's just enjoying the moment, just probably had a drink and is feeling quite relaxed and is just actually taking time out to be in the moment, which I think none of us as human beings do enough. Oh, little one's going to have a little rest, probably in the shade that mum is providing, or at least some of its body's in her shade. Now she's moving on. I wonder if she's going to lie down as well. Look at the underside of that little rhino's foot. Oh, shame he got a fright for some reason. I don't know if you noticed how rough and textured the underside of that foot was. So, Lauren, you're asking how long will the little one stay with mum before becoming independent? So, a few years, probably as much as 4, 5 years, sometimes even more. The mother will, I've seen very old calves still hanging around their mums even when they've got a new calf. So they can stay with their mothers for a number of years before going off on their own. It's more likely if it's a female calf that it will stay with the female for longer. Once the male calf starts to become sexually mature, the mothers tend to encourage them to leave. But a female calf will sometimes hang around with its mother for a number of years. Um, and some research has shown that bond is maintained, throughout their lives. They might not be as closely associated with one another, but they certainly can have a bond that lasts a long time. So sometimes if you see groups of female rhinos together, adult rhinos, there's a possibility that they could be related to one another in some way, mothers and daughters, sisters. Oh, the little one is looking to get a drink. Oh, how sweet is that? Erica, you saying the fight to save rhinos is real. It keeps me awake. Yeah, that's I think it keeps all of us awake. It's just something that is actually too terrible for words. I have to sometimes try and force myself not to think about it. But yeah, it is a very, very real fight, and there are some incredible heroes all over Africa and all over the world that are doing amazing things to try and save the species, but fighting against a tide of cruelty and evil. So sweet to see it drinking there. The mother's just being so patient with it. Also, the horn is not big enough yet to be kind of poking into the mother and making her uncomfortable. So I find that when rhino calves get a bit bigger and that horn starts to get bigger as well, um, it can be quite uncomfortable for the female to nurse the calves. You can see the color of that rhino almost matches the color of the soil around the waterhole. So she's obviously been wallowing in the mud a bit. She has a distinctly reddish tinge to her skin, which is not normal. But as with these most of these pachyderms, they do tend to take on the color of the soil that they either wallow in or throw onto themselves. Just having a look underneath the belly of that little calf. It looks like it could be a female, a little female calf. So cute. Look at that beautiful face. Maybe a little scratch on mum's leg. Yeah, I definitely think that little calf is a female by the looks of things. Little mirror image of mum, both giving us the same view. And are you asking if rhino skin is as rough as elephant skin? Um, yes, it is. I mean, I have touched both rhinos and elephants. Yeah, so having touched both rhinos and elephants, the skin to the touch is not actually as rough as you would think it is. but I can't really say that I noticed, and I haven't touched them both within a short space of each other. So, um, and I can't say that I was thinking of comparing when I was able to touch the skin of a rhino or an elephant, but they it is quite rough for both of them. Elephants have a lot, if I remember correctly, quite a lot more little bristly hairs on their body, which can make them seem a little bit more rough. But the skin itself, probably slightly more rough for elephants. If I had to choose one, I would say that the elephant's skin is slightly more rough than the rhino's skin. I certainly wouldn't describe either of them as having smooth skin to the touch. But those little bristly hairs on the elephant definitely make a difference in terms of how smooth their skin feels, or how rough their skin feels, should I say. When I say I've touched both of them, I'm not advising anyone to go around trying to touch rhinos or elephants in the wild. I've touched rhinos during dehorning operations and capture operations, and I've touched elephants, kind of a semi-captive elephant as well. So, not suggesting that anyone goes to try and touch a wild rhino or a wild elephant. Looks like a little Cape wagtail darting around at the edge of the water there. Okay, well, we're going to take another look at Tembe as these rhinos head off and away from the waterhole. Let's go see what's happening at Tembe. Oh, wow. So this, we were talking about it earlier. Someone asked whether there were any breeding herds at Tembe. Well, here is the answer to your question. Little breeding herd coming down for a drink. Oh, tiny little one on the left there. Very, very small. Female in front with a tiny calf. Doesn't appear to be that relaxed. She's kind of holding her tail up a little bit high. That's often a sign of an elephant that isn't relaxed, when their tail is held up and not just hanging down normally. So yeah, they made a very quick run across the open area there for some reason. Maybe they were just really keen to get to the water, or maybe there could be a bull elephant following the herd that's been harassing them. Difficult to say. Those two look okay now that they're at the water, so it might just have been an excitement to get to the water hole. You can see the collar on one of those elephants there, the larger one at the back. So funny you're saying baby elephants seem more adventurous much earlier than baby rhinos. I suppose they do. You know, a baby rhino tends to stick very, very close to its mum, whereas baby elephants do kind of venture out and about. Perhaps it's because they feel safe in amongst the herd. They know there's a lot of adults around that are invested in their safety and will take care of them. Whereas, you know, and the herd can be quite spread out. So if you're a baby elephant, you might feel safe just wandering from one individual to another in your herd because you know them, they're your family. Whereas a rhino often will just be with its one mum and, you know, with its mum and not have others around. So probably not that keen to venture off too far from what it considers to be safety. You can see this elephant here that is in front drinking seems to only have one tusk. The little one seems to be having such fun splashing himself with water. See how he's concentrating the water around his ears. It's very, very warm in KwaZulu-Natal today. He's obviously wetting his ears to try and just enhance the cooling mechanism of those, you know, the blood that runs through the ears that then cools off the rest of the body. He's making sure that the back of his ears are nice and cool to help with that process. And that will continue to keep the blood in his ears cooler, because as long as the back of the ears are wet, the evaporation from the back there then keeps cooling the back of the ear, which in turn cools the blood. So evaporative cooling is very, very important for these animals. Sure, that is a big bull on the right there. See how the zebras are standing in the shade. Just another indication of how hot it must be up in Tembe at the moment. He ventured, that one zebra ventured out slightly and then did a U-turn and came back into the shade. These mahogany trees, they've got such a thick canopy of leaves that they really do provide the most glorious shade. So nice and cool to sit under one of those. I have one in my garden at home and I just really love and appreciate the shade that it gives. Magnificent trees. JP is asking, do elephants have any symbiotic relationships with any other species? JP, so if you mean, like a beneficial symbiotic relationship, I have seen elephants, and it's far more common in East Africa for some reason than down here. But when I was working up in East Africa, you would often see cattle egrets sitting on the backs of elephants and then hopping off and catching the insects that they disturb as they move through the grassland. I have seen birds like fork-tailed drongos doing that with elephants down here, following the herd of elephants around and just catching disturbed insects. So certainly there are other species that benefit from the presence of elephants. Elephants aren't tolerant of oxpeckers. I've never seen an elephant tolerate an oxpecker on them. So unlike other animals, the elephants don't benefit from the insectivorous birds that take ticks off them. That would be the obvious kind of symbiotic relationship that I would think of. But it certainly doesn't apply to elephants. They don't seem to, for some reason, tolerate the oxpeckers on them. So I'm just trying to think if I can think of any other. I mean, symbiosis is not only about mutualism, which is where both the organisms benefit. So symbiotic relationship can be commensal as well, or commensalism, which is where one organism benefits and the other remains unaffected. And the examples I've mentioned would be that kind of relationship. So a fork-tailed drongo or a cattle egret that benefits by getting insects that these elephants disturb. There might be a slight benefit to the elephant in those kinds of relationships. If I think about a drongo, for instance, they're very good at alarm calling if they see a predator. Now, whether that would benefit an elephant or not is, I suppose it depends on what predator it is, but elephants are fairly immune to most predators. They don't really have to worry too much about predators out there in the bush, unless it's a young elephant that's, happens to have lost the herd or wandered off and doesn't have the protection of the herd. So, the drongos and the cattle egrets and the birds that follow these elephants, I think that's more an example of a commensal symbiotic relationship where the bird is gaining a lot of benefit and the elephant probably not that much. And then, of course, you get parasitic symbiotic relationships, and that's where one animal benefits and the other is actually harmed. And there I can think of many symbiotic relationships, mostly internal parasites like worms and things like ticks or mites that can harm an elephant if the concentrations of ticks are too high. It can make animals anemic. It can pass on various diseases. So certainly there are lots of parasitic symbiotic relationships, but mutualism not that common with elephants, weirdly. Not as much as with other animals that benefit from oxpeckers being on them. And I've never really been able to explain why the relationship between cattle egrets and elephants is so much more common up in East Africa than it is down here. I have seen cattle egrets down here kind of in amongst a herd of elephants, but up in East Africa, they will literally ride on the back of an elephant, and kind of let the elephant take them to kind of new places where they can then hop off and start looking for insects. Um, I think almost all of my photographs of elephants that I took in the Ngorongoro crater when I was working there, the elephants were either surrounded by a flock of cattle egrets or they had cattle egrets sitting on their backs. So it was very, very common in places in East Africa. Maybe it is just to do with the trunk and the reach of an elephant, because if you think about oxpeckers and other insectivores that might sit on an animal and feed on skin parasites, they will also often really aggravate the animals by opening wounds and feeding on blood. So they're not always helping the animal. Sometimes they are actually um, they causing the animal a bit of pain by opening up a wound that is scabbing over and trying to heal. And then feeding on blood can't be very beneficial to the animal. Most animals don't really have the ability to hurt that oxpecker or injure the oxpecker or kill the oxpecker, because they all they can really do is kind of shake their skin around or shake their heads or shake their ears to try and dislodge the oxpecker, whereas an elephant with a swat of its trunk could actually end up either killing or hurting an oxpecker on its body. So perhaps that is the reason why we don't see oxpeckers on elephants, or like we do on other, antelope or rhinos and things like that. Very interesting question. It is a lovely, peaceful sight in Darkman Lover. There's so much going on, but yeah, I always find watching elephants quite peaceful and meditative, I must say. Oh, look at that little one. So sweet. Gosh, that's a really big bull there. Doesn't appear to be in must, so just kind of peacefully coexisting with the herd. Elephant bulls in must, when they come into these herds, they can cause quite a lot of panic and consternation. But he seems to just be socializing. With the little one rolling around in the dirt. So cute. Debbie is asking, how do elephant bulls interact with females from their birth? So, Debbie, it's another fascinating question, and I don't think there's enough research that's been done on that. I think a lot of the research that was done on this kind of thing has been done up in East Africa. Um, but, bulls do get chased out of their birth herds by the females when they reach an age where they've become sexually mature. And there's good reason for that. They become very boisterous and, they can be just a bit of a hindrance to the herd. And being so boisterous with little calves around, the females just don't want the risk of injury to the babies with those boisterous males. So they get chased out and they spend uh, quite a bit of time away from the herds as bachelors and then join up with these female herds temporarily. And I don't know how many recorded instances there are of them joining up with the same female herd that they were born into. I'm sure it must happen, but I can't say that I've read any behavioral papers on what actually goes on there. From a genetic point of view, it wouldn't really make sense for them to constantly join up with the herd that they were born into, because what that means is that they are then going to potentially mate with mothers, aunts, and sisters. So it would make more sense for them to, move away and eventually join up with herds that they are not related to. Um, so yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I don't think I've really answered it very well because I don't know. It's quite a bit of consternation happening here. What is going on, guys? What are you all shouting about? Even the impala are vocalizing. Something happened that got them all annoyed. It could just be the presence of a boisterous bull. There is a bull there that's being a little bit shaking his head around and being a bit temperamental, so that might have upset the females. But can you hear all the baby impala calling for their mums? I think that fuss that the elephants made obviously got the impala a little bit on edge. Now, that's definitely a little group of males there that's causing all that commotion. All of those there seem to be males of varying ages. And that's exactly the reason why the female herds don't like to have them around, because they do just get very boisterous and it kind of upsets the status quo and the peace of the herd. Darkman Lover, you asking, has a bull ellie ever broken a female's back when mating? Gosh, I have no idea. Again, an interesting question. I can't say I've ever read anything to suggest that, but I would need to go looking to see if there's any research on that that's been done or any sightings of something like that. I don't know of any. Just doing a very quick Google search. I can't find anything on bull elephants breaking females' backs. And as I say, I've never read any scientific literature on that. So I'm going to go with no, it probably hasn't been recorded. Yeah, so things looked a little bit tense for a moment there, but it seems like those young bulls that were causing all the commotion have either been moved off by the females or have settled down. These waterholes are really important places for elephants to socialize, for herds that are not necessarily always together to come together, meet up with one another, and obviously also for bulls to meet up with cows. White Wildlife Cam, I think that's your name. Sorry if I've got that wrong. Are there lions in this reserve? Yes, there definitely are lions in Tembe. I've actually seen any on the cameras, but they have been seen on the Africam cameras here. There definitely are lions here. Lions and leopard. No, Darkman Lover, it's a pleasure. Yes, I'll try and do some more research on that. But just the very cursory search that I didn't come up with anything on that question. Lady Macbeth is saying that you do see them here at night. That would make sense. I actually haven't watched this camera much at night, but it would make sense that they would be around after dark. But yes, there's a very healthy population of lions in Tembe. That male there to the left is chasing another elephant, and to me it looked like a young male. I don't think he's chasing a female. I think he's actually just disciplining a young male. Cat Fan is saying that she has seen lions here off in the distance near the tree line, if she remembers correctly. So, yes, I think many of you have seen lions. And although I haven't seen them on the camera here, I have definitely seen lions in Tembe in the past. I've been there a couple of times. Oh, wow, listen to that. Erica, yeah, nature is an incredible teacher. It really is, isn't it? It's a pleasure to be able to share my little bits of knowledge with everyone. But yeah, I I just never stop learning. When you spend time in nature, there's always new questions that need answering and new things that you learn. Picasso, you're saying it seems the Ellie bull is moving his point of gravity backwards, almost sitting on his haunches. I didn't actually notice that, but you're probably right. Are you talking? I think you might be talking about the one who was being chased as opposed to the one who was doing the chasing. And I suppose it would make sense to try and lower yourself down so that you don't get walloped off your feet by the bigger, more powerful bull. Just looking now, that one there with the collar on, I think is a female. Let's just see. And she looks like she might be almost flirting with that male. There is often a lot of commotion around mating in elephants because it is quite a traumatic process. The males are often so much bigger than the females, and the herd gets quite stressed by it all. The males can be quite boisterous. And the older females in the herds want to try keep their youngsters away from males like that. It's interesting because to me that big male doesn't necessarily look like he's in must. I can't see any obvious secretions from his temporal glands, but he is definitely quite excited. His penis has been hanging out the entire time rather than being tucked back where it normally is. So it seems like he could be sexually excited. Generally, females will choose to rather mate with a male in must because their testosterone levels are just higher and there's supposedly a better chance of the mating being successful. And normally, because a bull in must has higher testosterone levels, it's very unlikely that a bull that isn't in must gets a chance to mate because the male with the higher testosterone levels at the time will be the more aggressive one in a fight. Raw, you saying it seems as if the female elephants are very stressed. Well, I've seen Ellie's more stressed, but they certainly aren't settled, and I think it is because of that big bull. He's now retracting his penis, so maybe he's settling down. He was looking um, very excited and aroused for a while, but hopefully he's settling down now. See those older females, they are not happy with him. When he turns towards them, they're moving off with their babies. He's definitely causing a little bit of trouble in this herd. He could just be, you see how he's using his trunk to test all the females there. He's just testing, to me, looks like he's testing to see if any of them are in estrus. And they're not really appreciating that very much. Okay, well, we're going to leave these ellies and head over to another waterhole and see what is happening. We're at Stony Point. Sorry, I didn't quite copy where he's sending us. Oh, that's nice. With our gorgeous African penguins. Lovely to see them all out of the water like this. I see there is an ongoing court case to try and secure the fishing grounds of these penguins and try keep commercial fisheries out of the area where these penguins are trying to catch food and trying to survive. They are critically endangered. There's huge concern for the species, and a lot of people working very hard to try and secure kind of a marine protected area, or at least secure the fishing grounds and prevent commercial fishing operators from depleting their food. So I'll be following that story very closely to see what the outcome is of that. And let's hope that sanity prevails and that the species gets the protection that it needs. It's not just, we don't only need to look at protecting their nesting sites, but we need to understand that where they get food is in the sea, and there's a lot of competition for that food with commercial fishing organizations. So we really do need to try and limit the amount of commercial fishing operators that can operate in the areas where they are trying to breed and raise chicks. So, Mindy, you're saying many birds we see on these cams tend to have loose whitish stools. Does that have anything to do with what they eat or how their digestive system works? So it's more to do with their digestive system. So a bird does not have two separate openings like we would, one for urine and one for feces. They have a cloaca, and out of that cloaca comes normally a combination of urine and feces. And so the whitish stool that you're seeing is actually the white in there is uric acid. That gives it that white color. And you will see the same kind of thing in reptiles because they also have a cloaca and not kind of the two separate openings. So reptiles like crocodiles and other reptiles will also often have very white stools because it is feces, but it is feces combined with quite a high concentration of uric acid, which gives it that watery consistency and that whitish color. Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful picture. Betty's Bay with the beautiful mountains in the background where Cape leopards roam. Quite incredible to think that there are leopards roaming around in those mountains that often come right into the town. And then the gorgeous penguins and the gorgeous ocean. Oh, really, we are so privileged to live in such a beautiful country. And there's some cormorants there. I think we're looking at white-breasted cormorants and a couple of other species that I can't identify correctly at this distance. Probably Cape cormorants, I would imagine, the smaller ones. Yeah, I love Stony Point too, Dark Man Lover. It's always so nice to just have it as it's something so different to some of the other cameras. Sorry, I think there's something going on at one of the other cameras, so we're going to link to that. I didn't hear which camera it was, but let's quickly pop over to one of the other cameras. Lovely. Back at Founder's Lodge with our rhino who, is it the same rhino, I wonder? I wonder if it's the same female with the calf, because she did look like she was moving off when we left her. I'm wondering if it's the same. I see that there's a little ankle bracelet there. I didn't notice an ankle bracelet on the other rhino, but I could have just been distracted by the calf and not paying close enough attention. Okay, I think it's a different rhino. I definitely don't remember seeing the ankle bracelet. Yeah, this is possibly a bull. Just okay, so apparently, yes, it is definitely a different rhino. The other ones went off to the right. I love looking at a rhino sleeping. The way that they rest their kind of nose or mouth on the ground. Just it looks to me, and I'm sure it's true, that the head is very heavy. Oh, there we go. How wonderful is that? So there's our mother and calf from earlier. And there we've got what looks like a much bigger rhino. So I'm assuming it's probably a big bull. Mindy's saying the rhino with his Apple Watch does look like he's wearing a watch on his arm. But you can see the lengths that we have to go to protect these animals, watching them constantly, having people monitoring. Those bracelets have GPSs in them, so they can constantly monitor where the rhino are and just keep a close close tabs on them to make sure that they are safe. The anti-poaching units are on it all the time. Hugely expensive to protect these animals, paying for anti-poaching, paying for all the collars and the GPS monitoring bracelets. Well, we're coming to the end of the show. There's only about 30 seconds left. Time has flown by, and hopefully, I'm going to join you again tomorrow as long as we don't have any tech issues. It's been absolutely wonderful to be with you all. Have a wonderful day further, and we will see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Goodbye for now.